In the biting cold of the night, 4 shadows trembled, forgotten by the roadside. When everyone else turned away, an unexpected gesture kindled the flame that would change destinies. Where there was rejection, family was born. Subscribe to the channel and follow this story that warms even the impossible. The rain poured down mercilessly over the Jequitinhonha Valley, transforming the gentle stream into a furious river. Severina held her 3 daughters tightly against her chest as she watched, from her mud and straw window, the world crumbling down. The roar of the flood swallowed the cries for help from the miners in the lowlands. Among them, Tiãozinho, her husband, fought against the muddy current. The waters took everything: their shack, their tools, the gold nuggets hidden in the mattress, and finally they took him too. There was no body to mourn, only the cutting silence that followed when the waters receded, revealing the destruction. Raquel, 12 years old, held the hand of little Iara, only 5, while Joanna, 9, stared at the horizon with empty eyes. "Mom, where did Dad go?" asked Iara in a thin voice. Severina swallowed the lump in her throat. "He went to the other side of the river, my flower, a place where the earth doesn't collapse." The community of Barra do Capão, once united by the hope of mining, was now divided in misfortune. The store owner, Mr. Juvenal, was the first to appear at their door the next day. "Severina, I'm sorry, but I need the shack. There's family coming from Araçuai who will work on the recovery." It wasn't a request. It was an order. "But where will we go, Mr. Juvenal?" "The girls." He looked away, adjusting his worn hat. "There's no place here anymore for those who don't produce. 4 mouths without strong arms to work is too much weight for what's left." 2 days later, with a burlap sack containing 1 change of clothes for each of them and half a dozen rapadura candies, Severina left Barra do Capão. The daughters walked in silence, already understanding that crying only wasted energy they needed to conserve. They followed the red dirt road, with no destination beyond far from here. At nightfall they found precarious shelter under a large tree by the roadside. Hunger was pressing, but the rapadura needed to last. She broke a small piece for each one. "Eat slowly, my daughter. Make it last on the roof of your mouth," instructed Severina, watching Yara suck the sweet with closed eyes. Raquel, the oldest, didn't touch her piece. "Save it for tomorrow, Mom. I'm not hungry." A clear lie that Severina silently accepted, respecting her daughter's dignity. Night fell heavily, without a moon. The cold of the Minas Gerais mountains penetrated their bones, and Severina embraced her 3 daughters, forming a human nest to conserve heat. That's when they heard footsteps on the road. A man approached slowly, carrying a bundle of twigs and herbs. He was tall, with dark skin marked by the sun, grey hair tied back. Severina held the girls close to her, heart racing. The man stopped a few meters away, observing the group with calm, almost sad eyes. "Cold night to sleep in the open," he said in a deep but gentle voice. Severina didn't respond, just kept her gaze fixed, defiant despite her fear. The stranger didn't come any closer. Instead, he knelt down and began arranging the twigs in a circle. With precise movements, he took from his pocket a stone and tinder, lighting a small fire that soon grew, chasing away the darkness. The heat reached the 4 slowly like an outstretched hand. "Seu Quim," he finally said. "A healer from Córrego Fundo, and you?" Severina hesitated. Names revealed stories that might be better hidden. "Severina, these are my daughters. We're just passing through." He nodded as if understanding more than what was said. He rummaged in a leather bag and took out a bundle wrapped in banana leaves. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing still warm cassava bread and some dried meat. "Share with me," he offered, extending it first to the girls. Yara looked at her mother, who after a moment of hesitation nodded slightly. The small hands accepted the food with reverence greater than hunger. They ate in silence, the fire crackling as the only music of that desolate night. When they finished, Soquim stood up. "Córrego Fundo is 2 leagues from here. There's clean water, shelter. If you want to follow, the path is that way." He pointed to an almost invisible trail that snaked into the bush. "Do you live there?" asked Joanna, speaking for the first time. "I live between there and here, girl. I'm what they call a wanderer with a certain resting place." He smiled slightly, revealing strong teeth. "But there are people there who know how to welcome." Distrust fought against need in Severina's chest. The open road offered no future, only more hunger and danger. The hidden trail was a mystery. but it had the promise of fire and food. "I can carry the little one," offered Suquim, noticing Yara almost asleep in her mother's lap. Before Severina could respond, the man was already crouched down, extending his strong arms. Surprising everyone, including herself, Yara went to him, allowing herself to be lifted safely. "Where there's fire, there's family," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. Severina took Joanna by the hand while Raquel, distrustful, maintained a calculated distance. They followed the trail illuminated only by the improvised torch that Suquim had lit. The dense forest gradually swallowed the group, leaving behind the road and everything they knew. Ahead only the uncertain promise of a place called Corrigo Fundo, carried by the deep voice of a stranger who had lit a fire on the coldest night of their lives. The trail descended, winding, and the air changed. The smell of wet earth, of distant smoke, of life. Severina felt a tightness in her chest. Not of fear, but of something that had not visited her heart for a long time. Hope. As timid as first light. The sun was barely rising when they saw the first houses of Corrigo Fundo. It wasn't a village like Barra do Capão. It was something different, older. Mud houses with thatched roofs formed a semicircle around a large yard. In the center, an ever-burning fire marked the heart of the community. "Quilombo," whispered Raquel, recognizing from school what she had never seen in person. Suquim, still carrying the sleeping Yara, nodded. "Quilombo dos Palmares wasn't the only one, girl. This is Quilombo de Santa Efigenia, more than 200 years of resistance." Their arrival didn't go unnoticed. One by one, doors opened, and curious, distrustful glances followed the approaching group. An elderly woman, majestic in her colorful turban, advanced to the center of the yard. "Quim," she said simply, eyes fixed on the strangers. "Donna Zuleide," he responded with respect. "I found them on the road with no direction." A heavy silence fell over the yard. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. Men exchanged uneasy glances. A young woman, her belly round with advanced pregnancy, was the first to step forward. "They are hungry," she said, not as an accusation but as a fact. Donna Zuleide, the matriarch, remained motionless. Her eyes scanned Severina's exhausted face, the girl's worn clothes, the silent pride they still maintained despite their misery. Then, without warning, her face opened in a gentle smile. "Berenice," she called to the pregnant young woman, "prepare thick porridge and lemon balm tea. The little ones need to regain their strength." She turned to the group of women watching. "Antonia, set aside a corner in the yard for them to stay today. Tomorrow we'll think about more solid shelter." The orders were followed without question. Suquim placed Yara, now awake and frightened, on the ground beside her mother. The girl clung to Severina's worn skirt. "You're not from here," observed Donna Zuleide. It wasn't a question. "Barra do Capão," Severina responded, her voice trembling. "The flood took everything." "Floods take, but the land remains," philosophized the matriarch. "Here no one takes land from anyone. Everyone takes care of their own, but the fire belongs to everyone." She pointed to the central fire, where Berenice was now hanging an iron cauldron. "Come." The first hours in the Quilombo were of silence and observation. Severina and the girls ate the offered porridge, feeling the curious but not hostile gazes. Raquel, always the most attentive, noticed how the children of the Quilombo, after the initial distrust, began to approach. A girl of approximately her age extended a small straw doll to Joanna, who accepted with a shy smile. Slowly, the tension decreased. In the afternoon, when the sun began to set, Donna Zuleide called Severina for a private conversation. Seated on a wooden bench in the shade of an ancient mango tree, the matriarch was direct. "Quim told me your husband is gone." "I'm sorry." Severina nodded, fighting back tears. "What do you know how to do besides mourning your loss?" asked Donna Zuleide, not with cruelty but with pragmatism. "I cook well, I sew. I know a little about gardening," responded Severina, straightening her spine. "In my mother's house, I learned to make soap from ashes and castor oil." The matriarch nodded, approving. "Here everyone works. Nobody carries anyone, but nobody falls alone." She paused, looking at the girls who now played timidly with other children. "We need someone to take care of the children, while the mothers work in the fields. It seems your daughters are already getting along well with the little ones." Severina's heart quickened. It was an offer to stay, to belong. "So we can stay then?" Donna Zuleide looked at her firmly. "For now." Trust here is built like a wattle and daub house, mud by mud mixed with blood and sweat. She pointed to a small building at the edge of the yard. That was a seed storehouse. It's empty. Now, you can stay there until the next harvest. Then we'll see. It was that same afternoon that Severina first heard about the danger lurking around Córrego Fundo. Two women were talking while pounding manioc, not noticing her nearby presence. Lieutenant Romero said there's a month. 1 month and then they come with tractors. Quilombo land is ours by right. Right on paper, my friend. Paper that never came from the government's hands. For them, we're invaders on the land our great-great-grandparents watered with blood. Severina moved away silently, her heart tight. The same ghost of expulsion that had followed her from Barra do Capão seemed to have arrived at Córrego Fundo before her. That night, while her daughters slept exhausted in the small storehouse transformed into temporary shelter, Severina went out to breathe the fresh air. The central fire still burned, and beside it she found Suquim sitting in silence. She approached hesitantly. I heard about the lieutenant. About the tractors. He showed no surprise. 1 month, he confirmed. The hydroelectric plant will flood all this. The government has already decided. They're just waiting for the paperwork. Severina felt the familiar weight of powerlessness. So we'll have to leave again. Not necessarily, replied Suquim, eyes fixed on the flame. Dona Zuleide sent for the lawyer from the Pastoral Land Commission. He arrives tomorrow. Says there's a way to prove our ancestral right. The fire crackled louder, sending sparks to the starry sky. Why did you bring me here? Severina finally asked. If you knew there would be no future. Suquim smiled slightly. Because I saw in your eyes the same thing I had in mine when I arrived here 20 years ago. And because every struggle needs witnesses. He stretched out a twig, stirring the embers. Besides, I have a good feeling about you and your girls. That night, Severina lay down among her daughters, and for the first time since the flood, allowed herself to cry softly. Not from hopelessness, but because she felt something strange growing inside her. A feeling of belonging threatened even before being fully lived. The decision was made before even falling asleep, like a silent oath made to the lullaby of the wind that whispered among the banana leaves of the roof. This time, she would not flee from the fight. This time, she would stay to defend the fire that had welcomed her on the darkest night. The lawyer arrived the next morning, a thin man with thick glasses and a worn leather briefcase. His name was Jeremias Fontes, and he spoke with the slow precision of someone who measures each word. The community gathered to hear him in the central yard. The decree for the dam has already been signed, he announced without beating around the bush, but there is a safeguard clause for traditional communities with more than 100 years of proven occupation. A murmur ran through the group. Proven how? Asked Dona Zuleide, her turban today red as blood. Documents, official records, old maps. Jeremias adjusted his glasses. We need incontestable evidence that this Quilombo has existed since before 1900. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Severina, sitting at the edge of the circle with her daughters, observed the faces of the community, oscillating between hope and disbelief. It was Suquim who broke the silence. We have the stories, the songs, the knowledge of herbs. The lawyer shook his head. Oral tradition is not evidence for a judge, unfortunately. We need paper, ink, something that the state recognizes. Another silence. Then a surprising voice rose. In the chapel, said Yara, the youngest of Severina's daughters. All eyes turned to the 5-year-old girl who shrank with the sudden attention. What did you say, little one? Asked Dona Zuleide, approaching. Yara looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. In the chapel there are old drawings, explained the girl. Behind the saint. What chapel, child? Questioned Jeremias, clearly skeptical. The chapel of Santa Efigenia, answered Suquim, a new gleam in his eyes. It's an hour from here inside the forest. Abandoned for decades. How do you know about this, girl? Yara shrugged. I dreamed it. A woman in a shiny dress showed me. Some laughed, others made the sign of the cross. Tradition and faith mingled in the blood of the Quilombo. We'll check, decided Dona Zuleide. Quim, take the doctor there. The group that left was small. Suquim, the lawyer Jeremias, Dona Zuleide, and surprisingly, Severina with Yara. The girl had insisted so much that her mother gave in, leaving the other 2 daughters in Berenice's care. The trail to the chapel was almost invisible, swallowed by the forest that had grown over it like a guardian of secrets. "Built by runaway slaves in 1832, explained So Quim as they walked. "Abandoned when the yellow fever outbreak took half the community in 1919. Machetes opened the way between vines and creepers. The heat was suffocating, and Severina carried Yara in her arms, the girl looking around with an inexplicable familiarity. "It's there," pointed the little one, when nothing was yet visible. And indeed, a few meters ahead appeared the stone and lime construction, partially covered with vegetation. The chapel was simple and beautiful, a single nave, altar of carved wood, and above it the faded but still imposing image of Santa Efigenia. "What exactly are we looking for?" asked Jeremias, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Yara freed herself from her mother's arms and walked straight to the altar. With the naturalness of someone who knew every inch of the place, the girl went around the image of the saint and pointed to the wall behind. "There." So Quim approached, examining carefully. "There is indeed something here," he murmured, running his fingers over the irregular surface. Carefully he removed years of dust and cobwebs, revealing what appeared to be a small door, almost imperceptible in the stone. Without an apparent lock, just a cross carved in the center. "How does it open?" asked Donna Zuleide, approaching. Yara didn't hesitate. She stretched out her little hand and pressed exactly the center of the cross. A metallic click echoed in the sacred silence, and the small door gave way. Inside the hiding place, a rusted metal tube contained rolled papers yellowed by time. Jeremias unrolled the first with trembling hands. His eyes widened behind the thick lenses. "My God," he whispered, "it's a collective manumission letter, dated 1850, granting lands and freedom to the slaves of Santa Lucia Farm." He unrolled another document. "And here a detailed map of the land boundaries, signed by the Baron of Diamantina, with the imperial seal." The lawyer seemed barely able to breathe. This is exactly what we need. With this we can prove not only the existence, but the legal right of the Quilombo over the lands. Not even the hydroelectric company can contest imperial documents." The return to the Quilombo was celebrated as an anticipated victory. The news spread quickly. The lawyer would leave the next day for the capital with the documents, initiating the process of official recognition. That night there was a feast. Drums sounded for the first time since Severina and her daughter's arrival, and the yard filled with dance and ancestral songs. But the joy was short-lived. The next morning, as Jeremias was preparing to leave, 3 pickup trucks appeared at the entrance of the Quilombo. Armed men jumped out, led by a tall man with a well-trimmed mustache, Lieutenant Romero. "We've come to do the preliminary inspection," he announced, his falsely cordial tone barely hiding the threat. "The evacuation begins in 3 weeks." Donna Zuleide stepped forward, imposing in her simplicity. "There will be no evacuation, Lieutenant. We found the documents that prove our right to this land." The man's smile faltered for a second, but he soon recovered. "Documents? How interesting. May I see them?" Jeremias, briefcase firmly held against his chest, took a step forward. "They will be formally presented in the judicial process we will initiate today." The lieutenant laughed, a dry sound like a breaking branch. Of course. The process, which will take years while the dam needs to start in a month." His gaze swept over the Quilombo, calculating. What a pity it would be if something happened to these documents before they reached the judge. It wasn't a veiled threat. It was explicit. The hands of the henchmen moved subtly to the weapons in their holsters. Severina's heart raced. Instinctively, she pulled her daughters close to her. Yara, however, escaped and ran to Donna Zuleide's side, facing the lieutenant with surprisingly firm eyes for such a small child. "The lady in the golden dress won't allow it," she said with the absolute simplicity of childhood. The lieutenant looked at the girl, first with surprise, then with disdain. "And who is this lady?" "Santa Efigenia," replied Yara without hesitation. "She protects the Quilombo." Laughter among the henchmen, but the lieutenant didn't laugh. Something in the child's gaze disturbed him. 3 weeks, he repeated, retreating to the vehicle. "After that, I'm not responsible for what happens to anyone who remains." They left amid a cloud of red dust. Only when the last vehicle disappeared around the bend did the tension decrease. Jeremias put the documents in his briefcase with still trembling hands. "I need to leave immediately," It's not safe to remain on the main road, Suquim nodded. I know a path through the bush that leads directly to Diamantina. I'll go with you. The preparations for departure were quick. Meanwhile, Donna Zuleide called the entire community together. We have 3 weeks, she announced with a firm voice. If the lieutenant returns before we have legal protection, we'll need to be ready to defend what is ours. She looked directly at Severina. This includes all who have chosen to make our fire their home. Severina felt the weight of that look. It wasn't obligation. It was choice. She could take her daughters and leave before the storm broke over Corrego Fundo. It would be the safe path, the path of survival she had always followed. But as she looked around at the simple houses, the central fire that never went out, the people who in just a few days had shown more humanity than her own people in Barra do Capão, something crystallized in her heart. We're together in this fight, she finally said, her voice firmer than it had ever been. Donna Zuleide smiled, a smile that illuminated even the deepest wrinkles on her face. Then it's decided. Let's prepare for whatever comes. No one noticed when Iara moved away, walking alone to the edge of the stream that gave the place its name. There, seated on a smooth stone, the girl seemed to be conversing with the running water, as if sharing secrets that only she could hear. The days that followed were of feverish preparation. While Jeremias and Suquim were in the capital fighting with the bureaucracy, the Quilombo organized itself for any scenario. We need a plan if they arrive before the deadline, insisted Antonia, the youngest of the elders. Around the central fire, strategies were discussed night after night. Severina surprised herself with her active participation. The woman who had always fled from conflict now suggested forms of resistance. In Barra do Capão, the miners made human chains when the police tried to evict them from the northern area. It worked for weeks. Her ideas were heard with growing attention. The daughters also found their place. Raquel helped in the improvised school, teaching the younger children what she had learned in the city. Joanna revealed a talent for ceramics, molding small amulets that, according to Donna Zuleide, carried the strength of the earth. And Iara, little Iara, became an almost mystical figure in the Quilombo. After the episode of the chapel, people whispered that she was blessed by Santa Efigenia. The girl spent hours by the stream, observing the water, murmuring words that no one understood. 2 weeks passed without news from Jeremias or Suquim. Tension grew. Watchmen were positioned at the entrance of the Quilombo, taking turns day and night. It was on a Sunday morning, when there was exactly 1 week left to the lieutenant's deadline, that Iara disappeared. Severina noticed the absence during breakfast. "Have you seen Iara?" she asked her other daughters, who shook their heads negatively. The search began immediately. The entire Quilombo mobilized, searching every corner of the community, calling for the girl. Nothing. Panic grew when someone suggested that she could have fallen into the stream. Severina ran to the bank, her heart racing. But there was no sign of tragedy in the calm waters. It was Raquel who had the insight. "The chapel," she said with conviction. "She must have gone to the chapel." A small expedition formed quickly. Severina, Donna Zuleide, Antonia, and 2 men from the Quilombo. They followed the now clearer trail, opened the previous week. The journey that had taken hours before was now completed in less than 1, and there she was, sitting on the altar, at the feet of the image of Santa Efigenia, as if conversing with the saint. Seeing her mother, Iara smiled serenely. "The lady told me what to do," she announced with childlike simplicity. Severina embraced her daughter, divided between relief and concern. "What lady, my love? What did she say?" The girl pointed to the image of the saint. "She said that the water knows the way. That we need to let the stream show." Donna Zuleide approached, her eyes fixed on the girl. "What else did she say, little one?" "That where fire and water meet there is protection," replied Iara. The enigmatic words stayed with them during their return to the Quilombo. At night, as the community gathered for the communal dinner, they heard the distant sound of motors. The first reaction was of panic. Were the lieutenant's men arriving before the deadline? But soon the sound revealed itself to be familiar. It was Suquim's old jeep, bringing him and Jeremias back to the Quilombo. The expression of the 2 men, however, didn't bring good news. "The judge granted a partial injunction," explained Jeremias. He recognized the preliminary validity of the documents, but said he would need time to examine everything. Meanwhile, the construction of the dam can begin in the uninhabited areas. What areas would those be? Asked Donna Zuleide. Seuquim unrolled a map on the table. The entire east side, including the lower part of the stream. That's where they'll start, building the smaller dam. And how long will the judge take to decide about the entire territory? Questioned Severina. Months. Maybe years. Jeremias sighed. Bureaucracy is another form of violence. The silence that followed was as heavy as stone. That's when Iara, whom everyone had forgotten was present, approached the map. The water will show the way, she repeated, placing her finger exactly at the point where the dam would be built. When they break the earth, the water will speak. No one fully understood, but something in the girl's conviction kindled a faint hope. 3 days later, the first tractors arrived. As predicted, they began working in the east area, near the source of the stream. The community watched helplessly as machines knocked down century-old trees and opened large wounds in the earth. Lieutenant Romero personally supervised, a smile of satisfaction on his face every time he looked in the direction of the Quilombo. We will resist, insisted Antonia. We can make a human chain prevent the advance, and we will be arrested or worse, replied Seuquim. We need to be smarter. It was on the 4th night of excavations that it happened. One of the workers, digging deeper than planned, hit a pocket of underground water. The jet exploded with impressive force, knocking down the man and quickly flooding the excavated area. The workers ran in panic, while the machine slowly sank into the mud that was forming. The lieutenant shouted contradictory orders, his control crumbling along with the project. The next morning, geologists were called urgently. They examined the area, conducted tests, consulted maps. The conclusion was unanimous. There was a water table much larger than predicted in the initial studies. Building there would be impossible without much more advanced and expensive technology. This changes everything, explained Jeremias, who accompanied the inspection. The cost of the work would triple. The company will have to reconsider the entire project. A week later, the official news arrived. The construction of the dam was indefinitely suspended. The environmental impact studies would be redone, and new areas would be considered. The Quilombo de Santa Efigenia was temporarily saved, time enough for the process of official recognition to be completed. The celebration that followed was the most vibrant that the Quilombo had seen in decades. Drums sounded all night long, ancestral dances were revived, stories retold. In the center of it all, the fire burned higher and brighter than ever. Severina observed her daughters integrated into the community. Raquel danced with the young people. Joanna played a small drum made by her own hands. And Yara, the little prophetess, sat next to Donna Zuleide, both contemplating the fire with shared serenity. The water showed the way, murmured the girl. How did you know? Asked Donna Zuleide. Ayara smiled. I didn't know. The saint knew. Severina approached, sitting next to her daughter. Are we staying, Mum? Asked Yara, looking at her with those eyes that seemed to see through time. Severina looked around. At the Quilombo that had become home. At the people who had become family. At the fire that never went out. We are, my flower. This is our place now. 6 months later, in a simple but meaningful ceremony, Severina and her daughters were officially accepted as permanent members of the Quilombo de Santa Efigenia. They received a small piece of land to build their own house, with the help of the entire community. The construction followed the traditional method: mud, wood, natural fibers, each piece placed with intention, each wall raised with gratitude. On the day of the inauguration, Seuquim brought a special gift, a small circle of stones, carefully placed in the center of the new house. In it, he lit the first fire of the new home. To always remember, he said, looking meaningfully at Severina, where there is fire, there is family. She completed, her daughters by her side, the warmth of the flames reflected in eyes that no longer knew despair. Today, whoever visits the Quilombo de Santa Efigenia, now officially recognized and protected by law, always hears the story of the woman and her 3 daughters who arrived on the darkest night and found light in the community fire, of little Iara, whom many still believe is protected by Santa Efigenia, of the stream that protected the land by revealing its true nature, and mainly of the strength that is born when different people unite around the same fire. The wounds of the flood in Barra do Capão healed. The absence of Tiozinho transformed into honored memory, not paralyzing pain. And Severina, who was once expelled for being considered a burden, became one of the guardians of the Quilombo's tradition, teaching the younger generations that true family is not only of blood, but that which forms around the fire of solidarity. When new lost travelers arrive at Córrego Fundo, they are welcomed with the same phrase that is now carved on the entrance portal of the Quilombo: where there is fire, there is family. If you were moved by this story of resistance, belonging, and hope, share your impressions in the comments. Stories like that of Severina and her daughters remind us of the power of community and the strength we find when we unite. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more narratives that warm the heart and show that even on the darkest nights, there is always a fire to guide us.